Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, where we talk all things BYU and Big 12. I'm Trevor, and with me is chair, preservation activist Adam is here to give us some commentary this week. But BYU is 9-0 after a very eventful game against Utah, but it doesn't matter. We're 9-0. Like that, the outcome ultimately is what we wanted, despite what a lot of the Utah fans are saying out there. And we're going to get to that. We also want to hit upon the top 25 this week, the rankings that just came out, and we're going to get into those and kind of give our thoughts. I've only just now had a chance to look at it, so we'll kind of be digesting that in real time, as well as take a look ahead at Kansas. We're going to also be making our Week 12 picks across the Big 12 and looking at our Big 12 power rankings. And but before we do all of that, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. We also have another video coming out this week where we'll be doing a preview of the BYU Kansas matchup. I have a buddy who is a Kansas alum who's coming on to kind of get into that with us and give us a little bit of insights on what's going on with that team this year and what to expect on Saturday. And then also we'll be doing live reactions after that game. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't. And then also let us know in the comments how you how have your feelings on the BYU game changed now that you've had a full weekend to digest it, kind of sit on it, and let us know that in the comments. And Adam, I'll start with you. How, we were kind of reacting in real time. I feel like both of us kind of started the video a bit stressed and a bit, just relieved. And I think by the end of the recording, which was like an hour, it was like 3 a.m. or something, after which I stayed up for another like 45 minutes on Twitter, which I should not have done. And so I feel like we ended a lot more positive than we initially felt when we kind of hopped on there. So now that you've had a few days to sit on this, how are you feeling?
Still just as satisfying as it was to watch that field goal go through as the seconds tick down. That was awesome. That was absolutely awesome. Those victories that you pull out of the jaws of defeat are somehow the sweetest. One of the most stressful games I've watched in recent memory. I mean, so much stress going into that game. So to see us pull it out was great. But the fallout's been real since then. I mean, national headlines and the Holy War's back, baby. It adds to the lore every time. Something's got to happen. Something's got to happen that both sides remember seemingly indefinitely. So the holding call, the comments, the post-game comments, the social media back and forth. It's been interesting to watch.
Yeah, certainly, and we'll get into that. But before we do, I'm kind of curious because this is something I've been asking myself: is out of the Holy War victories that BYU's had over the many years, and maybe your memory goes back farther than mine does. It was pretty hard to always get those televised growing up, in the East. I was pretty young, so I don't necessarily remember a lot of those. I think my first memory was my first Holy War I attended, which was 2003, which was
Blizzard game.
The Blizzard game, exactly. So that was not great. But since then, Mission was in between there, and then from 2006 on is really kind of my really clear memory of a lot of these Utah games. And so that's kind of my like recent modern history, I guess the last 20 or so years. But maybe you go back farther. But what are your favorite victories? We kind of talked about this on Saturday, and where does this one, do you think, stacks up?
Yeah, well, one of my all-time favorites is 96 because my very first BYU football game in person was 1993 BYU Utah. And they kicked a 56-yard field goal, whatever it was, with a minute and change left. And I remember bursting into tears in the stadium. I was 8 years old and just like, Dad, let's go home. I can't do this. Like, I was just devastated. And so then I watched the two 34-31 games after that, and we had a 3-game losing streak. So 1996, we broke the 3-game losing streak. We just stomped all over. And that was the last time we won by a comfortable margin. And that was an awesome game. So definitely that one. 2001, Luke Staley. Running down the sidelines to preserve a perfect season. That was another one reminiscent of this game, actually. And then you've got to look at the 2007 game I was there for in person, 4th and 18. So there's been some really memorable ones, at least in that era. The 2010s, pretty forgetful.
Yeah, I would. So, like I said, going back to 06 is where my like clearest memories of these games are, and I would say for me, I mean, this was the implications of this game are greater than any of those other ones. I mean, maintaining our perfect season, having a chance to play for the Big 12 championship at a Power Four conference and play to win that conference, but also for a spot at the very first expanded playoff and even have a bye. There's just so much on the line with this that this was so clutch. And then but I kind of think the last one in 2021 I liked better because it was a more decisive victory. So many of these games, which
Oh,
it's so
absolutely.
exciting to have those exciting, thrilling victories. I think of I mentioned 06, there's 07 as well, 09, and those were all fun victories, but we didn't have one that was like just really decisive. And it felt like this year should have been like the 54-10 type of a victory. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It doesn't matter though, we won, and that's kind of where I come down on it. So speaking of which, and we've got a comment here. We're going to get to the playoff rankings here in a moment, but real quick. So because I want to crap on Utah a little bit, but before I do, I want to talk about the good things that I saw. First of all, the uniforms this uniform matchup was elite, and that includes Utah's. This is my favorite look of theirs that I've maybe ever seen. It's very, classic throwback, and I can't believe Under Armour kind of did something right. It took them a long time to get there. Utah needs to transition to these full time, with the red and the white pant, just all the combos that they can do.
Yeah.
Their best look. And I like our traditional look with the white hats, but this was great. The all royal as well.
I thought this was great for the rivalry matchup, and I
Yes.
do love BYU's all royal. I don't love Utah's blood clot look where they're just all completely red. I think they need to get a white jersey, white pants somewhere in there. The helmet is their best one. This logo, which I think they've started to embrace, is 1,000 times better than the U logo that they've had. And I think their helmets were excellent. I think this works really well in the rivalry game. The red on blue is it's awesome. I totally agree. I just don't know if Utah should go with the blood clot all red. And I know I'm being a hypocrite because I love the all blue for BYU, but their red jersey pants don't quite match their helmet. They can't quite get there. And I don't know why I feel the same way about the Cardinals when they go all red. It just doesn't. For some reason, that color combination doesn't work typically, but man, when you get those pictures of each side lined up down the sideline, the lines facing each other, it looks so cool, man. That just looks awesome.
I agree. It's a special occasion thing. Like I know it wasn't the exact same uniform that we wore against Southern Illinois because it had was it the white or the nickel face mask? Doesn't matter. Yeah. This was with the royal face mask. I think you saved this for these special occasions in the Holy War. Now that we're in conference, you can have that and make that kind of this new thing going forward. So I think that's really cool. In general, I wouldn't do the color rush thing, but yeah. So aside from, but the logo, I think they are transitioning. I think they've said somewhere that, this kind of with the Big 12, that's kind of turning a new era, I guess, with the logo. And my dad who's a Ute, has 5 Utah hats, and they all have that old logo. I was like, did you want any with the new logo? He's like, no, I don't like, so so whatever. I think the design of the uniform and everything I love. I actually can say I love it. I think it's really good. It's the shade of red. It just incites anger inside me, which is maybe why Utah fans are so hostile. I'm thinking, which I want to transition into what we've seen from Utah. I don't want to break down everything. Obviously, there was a complete meltdown. We talked about it in real time on Saturday, but just calling the officiating and questioning their professionalism while he was completely unhinged, I think it is wild. It's a very bold move. And yeah, I just think that it really says a lot about the organization, and I can't believe that the school hasn't done anything. His apology was the least apologetic apology I've ever seen.
Not an apology statement, not an apology. Yeah,
and I understand, seeing some of this behavior from Witt, from the players, but I thought, Witt did, throw that chair, which, fine, things like that happen. But I thought for the most part, the players handled it pretty well.
I saw Snowden's press conference. That was incredible. He was the most professional of the bunch. I mean, just that kid is stellar. I mean, that's who you want representing your organization. Put a microphone in front of him instead of the AD, because he acted like the AD, and the AD acted like the freshman who's never been in a rivalry game before. Smith Snowden, if we're talking about good things that came from Utah's side, his press conference was really impressive. He handled that well. He shut down the questions he needed to shut down. He didn't get baited in anything he shouldn't say. And he handled that like a pro.
Yeah. When it comes to the call, well, anyway, actually, people are complaining about the fans, and yes, there's bad fans on both sides. It does seem that it's escalated a lot more with Utah fans. I think it's a pointless.
The water bottle incident is unfortunate.
Yes, there. It does seem like there are things that escalated more with the Utah fans, but it is the holy war. I'm not gonna, I think probably most Utah fans are good people that are just there to enjoy a football game. But you see a lot of this escalate, and you wonder, when you see this kind of behavior coming from the top of the organization, what kind of message and does that send to fans, and kind of permission does it give to fans to behave in a certain way?
Right.
In terms of the call, what was it? Seen some people say, it doesn't matter because it was the call. Let's move on. Versus like everyone with each, a million different grainy photo or, videos of the call. It was clearly a call. There have been people that with a lot more experience than I have that have looked at it. There, somebody who's I can't remember the officiator. Well, I guess former officiator.
It's Terry McCullough.
Yes,
who is the head ref for the NFL.
Right.
He did a whole slew on Twitter about this, not only saying, look, this is a call every time, but then the complaint is, well, it was inconsistent. So then he comes out and he says, I've watched every snap on the all 22 footage, right? So you can see the whole thing. He said this was not an inconsistent call that game. This is how they called it. So that surprised me, because I was saying, yeah, Utah fans have you got a point. If you're gonna have any gripe, it's because it was inconsistent. He's coming out and saying, I watched every snap from the game and it was not inconsistent. This is the most experienced ref out there who has no skin in the game. None, except he wants to defend his refs that his fellow refs that came under fire. So but he doesn't care who wins the game. And I thought his insight was pretty insightful. And again, every fan base, BYU included, has fans that make him look bad online. But the way they were attacking that guy, it's not a good look. The 1% of Utah fans who are out there doing this are giving a really bad look to the organization, because I've got a bunch of friends who are Utah fans and they're phenomenal people. We have great discussions around the rivalry. It's fun. But boy, you take this small segment of Utah fans, and it doesn't look good because they're very public right now. They're very vocal.
Yeah, maybe not that small, but yeah, pretty small segment of Utah fans. So I feel more validated, because you hate to win because of a call, and if it's ticky tack or whatever. But the more you look at it, the more egregious it looks. And you feel, and like you said, there's validation. People who know this a lot better than all of us come in and give opinions. And also, as you watch it, what I saw is, and we talked about this a little, is like, I'm pretty sure I saw Jake's Jake looking in his direction. Like that was his primary target. And the more you look at it, if he gets off clean, like he's off to the races.
It is a touchdown. That's Hans Olsen's assessment was that after he watched the tape, he came back and he said, if he doesn't hold, I'm sorry, it was Trevor Maddich. He says if he doesn't hold, it's a touchdown. So that's the smart play by the Utah player is to hold. And that's what he did. So he did the smart thing. He benefited his team because he prevented a touchdown pass that would have that would have given him even less. Well, I mean, I don't know if they would have had less shot because they had 4 seconds left. But anyway, in situationally, that's the right thing to do is to hold the player because JoJo Phillips had the leverage on him. He ran his route correctly. He would have been wide open, and he would have outrun the secondary. JoJo Phillips was fast enough to take that to the house. So anyway, he makes the right move by holding, but it's still holding, and it's at this point it's hard to argue that, but it will be until the end of time in this rivalry game. It'll be argued, and
it won't be. The other thing about it is this isn't like the Miami Virginia Tech where the call literally was the game. Yes, the call, what the play on the field would have ended the game, but there was a call. It was the right call, and then BYU still had to go pretty much the whole field. I mean, this
it's not you only get out to the 19-yard line.
Yeah. So the fact that Utah say, "Oh, well, you cost," well, really, the defense not being able to stop BYU on that last drive cost the game, and then really on that last play where I was getting nervous for a minute with the flag out there. I mean, can you imagine had they been able to lateral that all the way back and gotten a touchdown and then just have that come back? Anyway, I'm done talking about the AD, but anyway, let's put this to bed because I'm done talking about the Utes. The one thing when we were saying good things about them and I didn't get to it was I do want to say their game plan was great. They came out with energy. It was basically the worst case scenario that we talked about potentially happening, and it did happen. They were still it was only one quarter where they were really able to score. Other than that, and especially in the second half, and I have it somewhere. This was I'm not going to pretend I went and got these stats. It was there on the hype train. They're talking about it, but let's see. He said, okay, Q2 was they had 8.7 yards per play and 100% of available yards. Crazy. Second half, 3.2 yards per play and 14.9% of available yards.
That's
so crazy. Just shut them down in that second half. And then, I mean, Jake Retzlaff, clutch. I mean, this is a few games now where he's had to be clutch. Maybe they're not perfect games, but when push comes to shove and they have to be, he is clutch. And they just moved. I mean, it was 3 plays and we were in field goal position.
Yeah. He is clutch. The deep ball is working for BYU. The intermediate passing game is working for BYU. It's a question of consistency and poise in critical circumstances for Retzlaff. And that comes with time. That comes with experience. We've seen his maturity. We've seen his growth before our eyes in just this season. If that continues, it seems like sky's the limit because he's got the moxie, he's got the guts, he's got the clutch gene, as they say, to finish games. It just really comes down to bringing that consistency on the drives that are outside of that 2-minute drill. Where he's had games where he's been lights out and he's had games where he struggled. And this was one where he really had a tough time with the environment. The offense had a hard time clicking in that first half. But I mean, you want to talk about critical penalties. I know we belabored this, but the face mask call would have shifted the entire game because Utah would not have scored a touchdown on that drive. That drive ends, right? That's where BYU's defense adjusted, was on that drive. They blitzed, they got to the quarterback. That drive ends. BYU's offense is now moving the ball. They moved it down towards the end of the half, and you don't run out of time with that snap infraction penalty. I mean, you can go through all the scenarios, but I think that's where BYU's defense really started to click, was after the second touchdown. They really played well, and they got roasted on that bad face mask call, and then got scored on. But outside of that, the defense really showed out and adjusted well, and counterpunched to the haymaker that Utah threw in the second quarter.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree. Okay, so now that we've discuss that. I'm tired of it. It's all we see on social media. I want to move past it. But before I do, I forgot. I just remembered. I'd love this from Greg Wrubell. It's only mostly dead. So that was definitely a BYU in that game. Just when you thought we were dead, only mostly dead.
Yep.
And then I like that from Jacob Robinson with the U. Maybe a little cocky, but I like it. So anyway, so let's move on to the top 25 and get to David Chase. Finally, if you're still with us, did we watch it? I did not watch it. If you did, let us know your thoughts on what you saw, but we do want to get to the rankings nonetheless. So Adam, as I try to pull this up here, what are your initial thoughts there?
Yeah, so I did watch, and I think there was a little bit more respect thrown BYU's way. I think there was some recognition that there was an error made last week. Now they didn't rank us ahead of Indiana, which is still really tough to defend by that committee, but they did put us ahead of Tennessee this time. And so to rank us at 6th, I think is at least a sign that we're moving in the right direction with the committee. So I like where we're at. Ranked 6th is a certainly a nod of respect. We've got to continue to win. But I felt that way from the beginning. Kalani talks about this where the rankings still don't matter, and they don't, especially when you're in the top 10. They really don't matter if you continue to win, because there's going to be chaos all over this top 10, as we've seen already. Georgia is out of the playoff right now. And whether that's going to continue or not, I don't know. I hope they lose to Tennessee. I think they might. I feel like Carson Beck is just too out of sorts, and that would be a fun one to see a dominant team like that fall out of the playoff completely. We'll see what happens with Alabama and other SEC schools. 4 Big Ten schools in the top 5, so huge bias there. 4 SEC schools in the top 12. That's always going to be the case. We're not going to get around that. And the committee is going to use their quote-unquote eye test to defend that all the time, whatever that means. That's like the opening the door as wide as you can for bias, is saying, well, they passed the eye test. But that's what we have, right? We have a committee that's going to be biased towards those 2 conferences. But we're there. And it's all in our control. Just win, and you control your own destiny.
What's crazy, so what I see about this is, I mean, Oregon does look really good, and they've got a great resume because it's against Ohio State. I don't know. I mean, again, outside of those games against each other, they don't really do much. And then they go against each other, then even if they lose, it helps them move up. And so it's without really ever playing anybody else, you never really know. And so that's the problem that I have. Now, Ohio State, I did see something. They do play, a lot of the best teams, I think, in the Big Ten this year. And so they have a little bit more of an uphill battle. We're going to learn a lot about that game against Indiana. I think a worst case scenario for us is Ohio State wins, but it's a close game. You want them to beat Indiana. Well, I don't ever want Ohio State to win, but if they win, you want it to be a very decisive win over Indiana to show, hey, Indiana hasn't played anybody. Now they're finally playing a team, and and that might be enough to make them fall back a ways. Or you want Indiana just to go in and beat Ohio State, giving them their second loss in conference, and then it's a lot harder to defend that. Now, Indiana, at some point, even if they beat Ohio State, at some point you think, well, if they go to the Big Ten championship, they're going to have to face Oregon. And so that is going to be another test put in front of them. And so at some point they will have to prove themselves. I mean, BYU, all they can do is keep winning. The Penn State one, for me, is harder to swallow than Indiana. And honestly, I'm rooting for Indiana. It's great to see these other programs that traditionally aren't as good get some love and move up. It really shouldn't be between BYU and Indiana, hating on each other. But yeah, some of these other ones, it's just at this point, Texas, I don't think that they've done a ton either. And really, Georgia was almost exposed in a couple games, but continued to get love because they continue to win, which is what we say about BYU. The good teams find a way to win. Okay, fine. Maybe there's some bad ones. Then they were exposed, but Georgia beat Texas. Outside of that, Texas hasn't played anyone, but because they're kind of at the top of the SEC, they're going to, a top SEC team needs to be top 4. And
how they finished last year. I mean, Texas finished last year strong. They brought back a lot of those same players. That's the logic of the AP poll, and I wish that was not the logic of the committee.
Yeah.
You'd like to see that. But the beauty of the playoff is that you can't hide in your conference anymore. In a 12-team playoff, you have to come out and you have to play the other conferences. You have to. And so you're going to see in real time how good are these SEC schools? How good are these Big 10 schools? Because they're going to have to play everybody. And maybe there is only one ACC school, one Big 12 school, and one G5 school. So be it. They all still have to play, and it gets decided on the field. So I love that we're finally at a 12-team playoff, and we really get to see, is there an SEC bias, or are we going to get stuck with 3 out of the 4 semifinalists are SEC schools? Well, then I've been complaining all season about SEC bias, and the committee was right. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, because it gets to be decided on the field finally. So it's an imperfect system. I think it always will be, but it's miles better than what we've had before to get 12 teams out there. I am stoked for this.
So let's go through real quick. Actually, let me bring it over. Well, actually, I want it side by side. So let's talk about these games real quick and how we're going to root. So this weekend, Ohio State versus Northwestern. I've said it's probably best that we have teams at the top of the conference that then blow everybody else out. So that way it's clear cut. Okay, it's these two are at the top of their conference and these other guys all have a few losses instead of sneaking so many teams in, because that's going to improve the chances of the Big 12 getting a second at-large bid, which benefits BYU, gives us a little bit more wiggle room. However, I'm going to be rooting for Northwestern over Ohio State. I would love that they get another loss. Might benefit the Big 12 to have Ohio State just win, but Texas versus Arkansas, same logic, I guess. Just kind of root for Texas to win that game. So you have otherwise it just becomes more muddled at the top, and then more teams have an argument in the SEC to get in. Colorado over Utah. I don't love rooting for either of those teams, but at that point for the Big 12, Pitt over Clemson, because Clemson's still ranked. Although then Pitt will probably just be ranked again, so that's kind of a wash. Let's see here. Bama, yeah, root for Mercer over Bama, of course. That would
It's an
definitely.
oddly slow weekend. I went through some of the matchups, and there's just not a lot of exciting matchups. There's going to be upsets, because there always are, but there's not a lot of big-time ranked matchups this week for whatever reason. And so it might be kind of a slow week without those big-time upsets, but we'll see.
Normally, Bama has that that cupcake game right before the Auburn game, so that's interesting. They're playing it in week 12, but yeah, that would, I think, definitely take Bama out of playoff contention. Penn State, yeah, root for Purdue. Expose Penn State, please. UVA over Notre Dame. Yes, we need Notre Dame out of the way to clear.
And that could happen. UVA is a surprisingly strong team. They got a stingy defense. It's unlikely, but of any of the upsets potential from this week, I'd have my eye on that one to see if UVA can make some noise.
Keep SMU rolling, which I hate to root for them. And, after this season, I can go back to rooting against them. But, man, they're 14th. They've done a lot more than these other schools. I mean,
yeah.
Talk about Boise State. And, I'm happy for Boise State. I don't want to take away from, little guys. And it's good to see Boise State back to kind of how they used to be. But, they haven't really played. I mean, they played UNLV. They played a good game against Oregon. But the week before Oregon, Oregon played Idaho and struggled. So,
yeah.
It's just wild stuff. The logic there. I mean, so maybe Boise State should be higher, but I feel like SMU has looked very, very impressive. But okay, Louisville, yeah, root for Stanford over them. Just kind of take ACC teams out of the way. Florida over LSU. I mean, probably LSU's probably out anyway, but I don't know. Missouri, South Carolina. I guess South Carolina, because I don't know. Yeah, you're right. There's just not a lot. Maybe Wisconsin. It's at Wisconsin. Maybe they stun Oregon, but
I saw that too. There's a chance. There's a chance, but they got some distraction going on there at Wisconsin and Jack Del Rio and his drama. So we'll see if the team can focus.
Well, maybe it motivates them to come in. Tennessee, we want them to beat Georgia and just kind of take Georgia out of the running altogether.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, that's what I'd like to see. I just because Georgia's been so dominant for so long, and I love to see the transfer of power in college football. It's fun to see parity, so I'd love to see Tennessee win that. I really like Josh Heupel. It's fun to see Tennessee be as good as they are.
Get one more SEC team out of the top 12, for heaven's sake. Okay. So yeah, not the most exciting, but let's quickly look at did I have you mentioned Indiana. I did have this was some analysis done by CFP resume rankings, and they posted up on Twitter kind of comparing the two. And now it does say total resume rank for Indiana 8, BYU 9. That's surprising me because I look at what they've done, and I mean, Nebraska has had its moments, but outside of that, Washington has kind of had some moments, but their overall record is not that great. And so I'm just looking at who they've played, and yet somehow they're total. And I don't know all the analysis.
It is the Big Ten bias. It is the fact that they're in the Big Ten, and it just feels like the committee's not considering any of that. The strength of schedule rankings, they're just saying, "Wow, Big Ten, this is awesome." For whatever reason, it's like they're out to prove they don't have an SEC bias, so they're gonna have a Big Ten bias. I don't know, but for the top 5 teams in the Big Ten, like this is it's pretty disappointing.
When you look at the raw resume rank, I don't know the difference between the rating and the rank, but okay, so this is the score, and then this is where they fall in. I mean, BYU's 2, which we've been talking about. It's like outside of maybe Oregon. I think Georgia had played a couple of teams ranked in the top 25 as well. BYU is the only other one, and so I think that schedule, what they've done and what they've done against it. I think part of the argument for Indiana is that they've really won big against teams and scored a lot. But again, when you're not necessarily playing the toughest schedule, I don't know. So again, I think it's a little not weird because I guess it's to be expected, but a little indefensible to have Indiana ahead of BYU. But at that point, you're kind of nitpicking anyway. But it definitely does show their bias. And let's see, where did I wanted to pull up here it is. Let me pull this over. Here we've got the projected, as of today with the rankings that came out, how the bracket would play out, which I like moving up to that 3 seed.
Yeah,
a little bit better because
it's a good spot to be.
Yeah, certainly. Because then you avoid, even if you manage to win, you avoid Oregon for a round, and then it'd be fun going up against Steve Sarkisian, former for 1 year Big 12 foe, and or potentially against Indiana, and then you can say, hey, well, let's see that matchup. So it's just kind of fun. Although it'd be cool too if. I hate Ohio State, but I would hate losing to them. I wouldn't be able to handle that as a 4 seed. But
too much.
playing Boise State in that would be a lot of fun too. With the rivalry that's ensued. So realistically, we're not going to see BYU get to the 2 or 1 seed. So this is though it's kind of between those two, or the best case scenario if BYU is able to win out. So. And that's the way it is. So I don't know what else we can glean from that at this point. Like you said,
a lot of football left to be played.
A lot of football left to be played, and without them really, they're behaving. Not only do the rankings look a lot like the AP poll, but they're behaving the same. And you lose, we have to move you down so many spots. You win, it just has that same kind of logic where it was always sold before it started. No, we blow it up each week and we put it back. And really does not feel like they're doing that because of course that would mean they'd have to admit that maybe some of these other teams that are in those big 2 have to go down. But this is, I think you probably even made the point that this is really almost a way of trying to leverage. Hey, look, you guys, we're going to get all these spots anyway. You may as well take our deal and give us the 4 guaranteed, and you guys take the 2. It's almost, in an expanded playoff, it feels like it's really kind of positioning for that negotiation. So anyway, a lot of football left to be played. So don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but it really is telling, and it makes me nervous. If BYU, even going undefeated and losing a conference championship game, does not feel like there's room for them in this playoff at this moment. The way
I still think there will be by the end. I think there will be by week 13 if BYU really goes undefeated. You're going to see so much shakeup in that. If you have an undefeated regular season, I think BYU will be ranked high enough where a loss to Colorado or Kansas State in a conference championship game will keep you in that playoff with an at-large bid. Obviously, depends how a lot of other things fall. There's so many different dominoes, and now there's so many different scenarios there. But I still think it's more probable than not if we go undefeated, we somehow land in the playoff.
Yes, I hope so. Like you said, yeah, there's lots of chaos that can still happen, and I think we can expect to see that. And so I want to get into mentioning that we still have to go undefeated. That's still number one goal for BYU is to win the next one. And so we're on to the next one. We have Kansas this week, and I want to get into that. But why don't we discuss our picks real quick, and then we'll end with that. And so, Adam, as I pull this up here, and let us know, anyone watching, do you think BYU can afford a loss in the conference championship game and still get an at-large bid in the playoff? I'm curious to hear what other people think, because right now I'm pessimistic, but there is still a lot of football. But so what? As I pull this up here, how did this week go for you?
50%. I see that, and I'm batting 500. That's not bad in baseball.
In baseball, the last few weeks we have not been on point.
So should not have put my faith in UCF. I fell for the one game mirage. I thought they could take it to ASU. I had not bought into the whole ASU revival completely. This week when they play Kansas State, that will really tell us where ASU stands. But I thought they could pull that out. I wondered if Kansas was going to break through one of these games. I didn't think they would in that fashion. That was terrifying. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And Cincinnati just fell apart. They proved they're still clearly a year away. That's a game they should have won. That's a beatable West Virginia team at home. They should have won that game. And that was, I feel like they really just laid an egg in that where they should have come through.
Yeah, they should have, which is good because we had the same pick and I changed it to have a little bit of more difference there in the picks. And so thank you for that.
You bet.
But real quick here, I asked a question. So we have Big 12, number one, BYU says if SMU wins the ACC and if BYU loses, BYU will still be in. I mean, yeah, I think
I can see that. Yeah.
SMU winning the ACC, if they do, which I hope they do, is really going to be a feather in the cap for BYU.
Mm-hmm.
So,
because now you beat the ACC conference champ, and you were, regular season Big 12 champs. That, to me, that says something, and I think it's hard to ignore BYU at that point if you lose in the title game.
Yeah, especially if it's a good game.
Yeah,
and I mean, I'm sure TV, all the networks will love if Colorado, wins the conference because that'll be ratings gold there. Okay, so here's our overall. You're 53-27. I'm 52-28.
Breathing down my neck, Trevor. I got to do a little better.
I'm closing in on you, but okay. So for this week, again, we're fairly similar, but for this first game, you got Houston at Arizona. You're feeling good about the former bottom dweller of the conference, huh?
I am, and it's more so I'm feeling awful about Arizona. Arizona is just laying eggs left and right. I don't know what they have to play for anymore. Houston's got a lot of energy. They've got a chip on their shoulder. They were disrespected, not only from preseason picks, but early on this season when everybody was kind of pointing at them and laughing. They lost early on. I can't remember who it was, UNLV maybe. They struggled early in the season, and now they're roaring back. And I think they're going to dump truck Arizona.
Yeah, I've got them as well. I think they've, it took a little bit of time and they figured it out, but they showed flashes early in the season, and we talked about
Mm-hmm.
that. So Arizona, I'm not surprised they're not as good as they were hyped up to be. I mean, there was, coaching change, a lot of
I,
major changes there. I'm just surprised at how much worse they are.
I agree. I agree, and I feel really bad for Arizona moving forward. If you're looking at next year, it doesn't look any better. I don't think that head coach has established a track record of success, and I was confused about the hire, and so far it's not panning out well. And you just feel for them because they had a really really good thing going coming into this year. You feel like they would have been top of the conference this year between BYU and Arizona because they really had something going.
Yep. So aside from that, let's see here. Um, Now we've got our two favorite teams in the conference are going to be playing, and let's see. Oops, why did I go back? Okay, so you've got Colorado. I'll admit I also have Colorado. As much as Utah stuck it to BYU and gave us a run for our money. Apparently Rose is injured, so there's more injuries. But also, I think that was more of a rivalry thing than it was really where they're at.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. They're that poor team is broken. They're broken more emotionally. If they come back and win this Colorado game, that is arguably one of the finest victories in school history. Just because the context, to beat a team like that at Colorado, coming off of what just happened in the rivalry game, I expect they'll just be lifeless in this game because it is tough to come back from that, especially where they're at in their season, where things just look so bleak.
Oh, it's sad.
Yeah.
Kind of. Not to me. Why does it do that? Not to me, but to Ute fans. All right, so you got Baylor at West Virginia, which it's tough to go into Morgantown and win.
It is, but I'm bought into the Baylor hype train. I think they've turned a corner. Dave Aranda's gonna keep his job, and they're gonna be a force next year in the Big 12. I like Baylor, and I like Baylor in this game.
Yeah, I did too. But I wanted to mix it up a little bit, and it worked well for me last week. But also, West Virginia has shown flashes. They've been hot and cold, and
Yeah.
like I said, it is in Morgantown, and I do believe in this Baylor defense and what this Baylor, and ever since they made the QB switch, really, they had to. Everyone thinks it's the same Baylor team that started the season, and it's definitely not. And so I think they do need to be taken seriously. But I think this could be an interesting game. I could really see it going either way. And then you got Kansas State at ASU, or no, ASU at Kansas State, but you've got the Wildcats there in that one.
Yeah. Yeah. This to me is the game of the week for the Big 12, outside of BYU Kansas. Arizona State looks legit, 7-2. Kansas State has stumbled a little bit here and there, and this is not going to be an easy game for Kansas State. They have shown some vulnerabilities. Arizona State could capitalize on that. I think Kansas State is legit. I still do, even with that surprising loss to Houston. I think Kansas State is legit, but we'll see. We'll see. This was a tough pick for me.
Yeah, so I went into like team stats and everything, and I was like breaking it down, trying to figure out who would have an edge because I had a hard time like feeling this one out. And there were a lot of similarities in terms of like in styles, in terms of run yards and passing, and just
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it. And I was like, no, neither team kind of stood out, or I didn't see anywhere that at least anything glaring that stood out and said, oh, this team might have an edge here. So I was just looking at it, and I believe in Kleiman as a coach. I think Wildcats are a little bit more established as a team. Arizona State has had a very successful season, but it still feels like they're a year away from, they kind of jumped a year. It feels like they're, year two still a little bit more tough sledding a little bit. You see some signs of improvement, and they've exceeded that. I just don't know if they're there yet. And since it's in Manhattan, I also am going to go with K-State in that. This is another interesting one. Cincy at Iowa State.
Yeah, and if Cincy had won last week, I think I would have gone with them because Iowa State's been exposed now 2 weeks in a row. Tough to bounce back from what's happened to them, but Cincy they laid an egg with West Virginia at home, like I said, and I think Iowa State's going to right the ship on this game. If it was a stronger team coming into Iowa State, I'd still be concerned about them. They're in a tough spot, and that team trying to bounce back from these 2 losses. But I think they'll right the ship against Cincinnati.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I do too. I had a similar thought process. So now let's talk a little bit about Kansas, because this is going to be, I think, I was actually, even before the Utah game, if that had not been a rivalry game, I would have felt more nervous for this Kansas game than I would have Utah. And which is weird because Kansas has lost a lot of games, but as you know, I've been kind of in their corner all season long until I finally wasn't. And then they started winning games. But they're a good team. We know they have talent. There's lots of talent. We saw that firsthand last year, and they have these guys back, and they've been in every single game this season. And and now their win over Houston just looks that much more impressive after Houston's kind of been turning it on a little bit. So I don't know. What do you make of this matchup for BYU?
I'm terrified.
I mean, I'll just be honest. Like, we're both picking BYU. Like,
Yes,
we're not going to pick against BYU.
But I almost did not. And let me tell you, there are 2 narratives around BYU the way I see it. One is you look back at 2 of the last 3 games, they've won on last minute plays against teams that are 1-12 in the Big 12. I mean, just teams that are down and out. And then they had a good game against UCF. But I think you could say BYU is running out of steam here. It's built on this psychological foundation where they're going to out execute every team, and they've done it. But you're asking so much of them to go in and have this amazing emotional victory against their rivals, and then turn it around and play an amazing Kansas team who is on the up and up. And part of me says, this is it. This is as far as BYU can go, because I get that narrative that, they've really struggled 2 out of the last 3 weeks. Take away the UCF game, that team doesn't look very good lately. What's going on? On the other hand, Oklahoma State was coming off of a bye. University of Utah is a rivalry game. Throughout the records there, it's all explainable, and BYU is going to bounce back and execute really well in this game. They're at home. They're going to show who they are. So that's where I was kind of debating back and forth. I do think it's a lot to ask of this team to come off of the incredible victory over Utah, and as they always say, watch the film, dump it on Monday, and move on. I don't know that you can do that when you're 18 to 24 years old. I don't know that you can do that. And I'm terrified because Kansas is coming in with a head full of steam. They want to get bowl eligible. They were incredible against a very stout Iowa State defense last week, just demolished them. And so this game scares me. The reason I picked BYU is for 2 reasons. Number one, I think it's time to stop doubting what they can do. They just keep winning. And number 2, if they do lose, I don't want to be right anymore. I don't want to be able to pick them to lose and be right on that. So I think they've earned the right to be picked to win the rest of the year, because you just can't pick against them anymore. They keep passing every test that's put in front of them, and I hope this is the same this week against Kansas.
Yep. That's not to throw in the usuals that people like to say, the Vampire Cougs at home, and kind of revenge factor that Kalani's had. Although I wonder if have we had 2 revenge games in a single season before with Kalani, which I'm not sure, because they were in Independence, so we didn't have as much consistency
in the schedule. I don't know.
But we, did we already use that up on OSU? I don't know. Was that a revenge game? But so I do think BYU can and should win this, but they're going to have to play better than they played against Utah. And so by no means is it a gimme. Like, this should be a very good one. I am nervous about this one, but definitely going with the Cougs. I want to, even though we're slightly backtracking a little bit here, we have, let's see here. So Big 12, number 1, BYU says, I truly wish we had Washington State instead of Utes in the conference. Holy War Trio, BYU, TCU, and Baylor kicks the Utes out. I would sign that petition. So I actually Had a tweet earlier this week. Let's see here. If I can, sorry, I'm switching screens here on this, but I kind of made a similar proposal this week here. Let's just trade the Pac-12. just trade it straight up. This is by far my most popular tweet ever, and so anyway, it goes to show there's a lot, the way that Utes have been in the conference, the way that they handled this loss, I think people are fed up with them. Now, I don't really believe that. I do think there's a lot of value in having Utah. I think BYU and Utah belong in the same conference. But man, they do their best to change my mind of that all the time.
It's really difficult to watch how they've come into the conference, the arrogant approach on social media, and now seemingly from their administration. It's been difficult to watch, but I agree. BYU and Utah belong in the same conference. It's way better to have that rivalry in the same conference. And if you're Utah, I think you're shaking in your boots a little bit to see what's happening now that we're on equal footing from a recruitment standpoint, both in the Power Four. BYU closed that gap a whole lot faster than I thought they would. I thought it'd take a few years, and the future looks much brighter for BYU than it does for Utah right now. We'll see. Next year, anything could change. Obviously, we had a bad year last year and have an amazing year this year, so you never know what's going to happen. But I am glad they're in the same conference.
Yeah. And in terms of closing that gap, I think you're also, you're starting to climb as they're starting to decline, helped a little bit in closing that gap sooner. But you made the point ever since, okay, so BYU and Utah have been in the same conference for a long time, but BYU had a lot of things going against it as being a church school where they're basically fielding teams of, guys from their local ward or whatever. It's not like necessarily the most developed program, but ever since BYU did start getting to that point where they were competitive at football, BYU generally has done better than Utah. We've obviously seen Utah have the upper hand in these recent years, but as they always like to point out, they were in a power conference and we weren't. So, you would expect Utah to be better. And yet most of those games came down to very competitive games, some of which had very controversial calls, by the way, which we've had to just stomach for a long time. So Utah, I don't feel bad for at all. But to your point there with Washington State, I had several people respond, they prefer Washington State, Oregon State, or even Louisville, which maybe that one's the most realistic. Send Utah to the ACC with their other former Pac mates. But no, I do think we keep them out. And yes, I've seen your comment, and since we touched upon this at the beginning of the episode, talking about the cheer coach who got hit on the head, which is just despicable. I'm glad that they've made the arrest. So I did see your comments. We talked about it, but so I'm glad that they've arrested somebody and that they've found who did it. But very, very sad moment when
it is. It's disappointing, and again, not representative at all of the Ute fans that I know that I'm friends with.
Right.
And I think they'd be extremely disappointed there the way their school was represented. But I'm glad they've caught the person, identified the person, and taken care of it, because that was awful. I saw the video of it, and just really sad when it gets to that point. That's unnecessary.
And then Crypt Orchid said, no comments from the university about that horrible assault is sad. They need to come out and discourage the violence from the stands. Yeah, I've been kind of surprised that there hasn't been more from the university that, like the Big 12 issued a fine, but what is the school doing with their, like, you gotta get, reel that guy in.
Yeah, they got to step in there too.
Speaking of fines, I thought this was pretty good from Hank Smith. He said on Twitter, he said, I think $44,000 would have been more appropriate. Right. I love that. Yep. So anyway, back onto the topic, I guess, on hand is we're talking Kansas and really Big 12 this weekend. And the path there for is there for BYU, but they have to continue, keep winning. They have to find a way to keep up that energy. And because and you hear this pointed out, well, maybe BYU is getting knocked for not excelling in any one area. They don't have that elite defense. That Utah's defense, by the way, is like championship caliber defense.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
it's very, very good.
Even a mediocre offense could win a lot of games and go far with that kind of defense. But where was I going with this? Oh, and at this point, it looks like, because we don't do any of those things great, the whole team, fortunately, you can make up for that because we have other phases of the game where we can make up for if one area is struggling. But at this point, it looks like, well, actually, I'll get to that in a second. But yes, you are very welcome. I know I saw your comments. I was planning on getting back to it, but no, I appreciate you bringing that up because it was unfortunate. Yeah. So anyway, I think you were going to say something. I cut you off, so I'll let you do that while I pull up the screen again.
No, I think we're moving on to power rankings. Correct? Yeah, and it's so I think it hasn't changed a ton from last week. I've got Arizona State up there pretty high as they're looming large after the Kansas game. I feel like we just got game after game that scares me now it's uncomfortable to be alone at the top of the conference because you watch so many others who are at the top of their conference go down each week. So it's uncomfortable. But I've got our future opponents up there, Arizona State, Houston, and Kansas, all in the top half of the conference, which it's been topsy-turvy this year. I mean, you look at how Houston started and where they're at now. It's crazy to watch, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I've got a lot riding on this week because it seems like every week these get flipped around.
Yeah, you had wild swings last week, and I was a little bit more measured. But this week I got pretty wild because I brought Kansas from that bottom row all the way up to the top row, and for me it was all about momentum. It was a huge win. They've been on the precipice of breaking out all season long. They finally done it at the right time, and it's just in time. They still have a chance to make a bowl game. And that's something that scares me too, is that they're going to be desperate. They have to win out to make a bowl game. Correct. And so this is a do or die situation, just like last week was. And we saw what happened there. But to be peaking at that time and have such a, to do it against a ranked team, which is also why I had Iowa State go down. And it's just because they're really doing they're really spiraling at this point, which is, they were so close. They were in the top 10, and to see it sink, not that I necessarily think they're a bottom 4 team in the conference, but just where they are in terms of this point they still have a chance. They could still find their way into the conference championship game. They need a little bit of help, but they could. Yep. So I don't want to say they're down and out completely, and how they respond going forward will say a lot. But yeah, it's still that middle. It's kind of hard. It is kind of, I think we're seeing more and more the conference become 4 tiers. It's just that top tier is getting a little bit smaller, but that middle is starting to get very muddled. And obviously we have we even have the same teams at the bottom. I thought about moving Utah up because of how they played BYU, but then with injuries and also the way the program acted and everything.
That was my exact thought. I was putting them ahead of OSU, and I just thought, man, with the fallout and everything else that's happened, that program is not in a good place right now. And not that necessarily affects power rankings, or the power rankings, are an expression of that. But it just, the feeling around the program is so destitute right now. And so is OSU. You could put them both down at, tied for 16th there at the bottom, because they just, I feel for both programs. Those are tough times.
Yeah, it is. I still think, we'll see. Both of us are high on Baylor with what they've done, and we talked about that earlier. I still think Kansas State is one of the better teams in the conference, but they're going to have to show it, and they're going to have their chance to as they end this season. It's just crazy because I thought when they beat Colorado in that head-to-head matchup, I was like, oh, they're in the driver's seat now. And
they were. They just spun out.
Yeah, so they deserve to drop because of that. I know they're on a bye, and I moved them down again, but and they won the head-to-head against Kansas. But that was, they almost lost that game too. So again, it's a couple weeks in a row of, it's a tight win, a rivalry game. That's what I chalked it up to at the time. But then to follow up that rivalry win, which is something BYU could do, a team with talent that's been at the bottom.
Absolutely.
Following up a rivalry
Absolutely.
game.
I mean, that is why Kansas is terrifying. I think you got to get off to a quick start. I think you'll know in the first quarter and a half whether or not BYU is going to rely on a comeback or a last gasp attempt, hopefully, which you just at some point that luck runs out, or if they're going to come in and take a commanding presence, say this is our house. You got the vampire Cougs effect, and they need that decisive first half more than they ever have before, because I think if you put that away early, you're not going to give Kansas a chance at home with the elevation factor in the cold, all that stuff. I think really can impact Kansas while they're playing away from home. But BYU's got to come out and be strong.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. I didn't do it, but now since we're talking about Kansas, what is your final score prediction?
I'm going to say 24-21 BYU.
Okay.
I wish I felt better than that, but that's where I'm at.
I honestly haven't thought about it at all. I think Kansas has been higher scoring than that. So I almost wonder if this game doesn't get into the 30s, look more like that Oklahoma State game. I don't know. I'm going to say like I said, I haven't thought of it at all. What if we say 38-35? I don't know. I reserve the right to change that in my Kansas preview video, but we'll say that for now. I don't know. Yeah, it could be another wild game, but
Yep.
I believe in this BYU team. At this point, it really does feel it feels inevitable. It's like Thanos, man. It isn't meant to be. Like, no matter all the scenarios, it's like with the wild bounces of the football, the fumble just going right to him, and like, getting that call, which was the right call, but getting that call and then coming back and just doing an amazing drive down and being clutch. And Will Ferrin with that grin, not even questioning for a second in his mind. I don't remember if we talked about it on the show, but I've seen it since then. The tweet that just said he, they asked him where he wanted. He said, "It doesn't matter. It's going in." Like, just
going in anyway.
Love that confidence. That is why I cannot be a kicker. I know at one point as a boy, you had aspirations to be a kicker, but
that's right.
What I want to know is, would you have had that same mental fortitude? Because that is just beyond impressive.
I would until I missed a big kick. And then who knows if I'd ever come back from it. It's easy to have that swagger when you never, missed a clutch kick, which to Ferrin's credit, he hasn't. But man, that guy is just he's as cool as they come. And I hope that continues, because he's missed field goals, right? But they haven't been in these crucial backbreaking situations. And to do that in that scenario was amazing. And I love that he's getting all the credit, and the crowd surfing and all that stuff is pretty awesome. Calling him Big Shot Bill, he's earned every single ounce of that.
Yes, he has. And it is a legendary kick, and a legendary moment that will be remembered forever. I mean, he's just solidified himself there. Yep. And I loved this one. There's a lot of things tweets I'd pulled up, but I just love this one. I mean, he grew up BYU fan, and isn't that every kid's dream, is to grow up and to play for the team that they love, but then to solidify yourself as a legend for that program.
That's
and
so cool.
Just it is amazing. I love it for him, love it for us, and for the program. And great to know we've got a kicker with ice in his veins in our corner. Right. Special teams has been elite. So fantastic. Well, I would have liked to have gotten to some others. Let's close out here with a couple comments here. We got 1-2 said, "It won't be close. BYU easily beats KU." I love the confidence, and
love the confidence. Keep it up.
I hope that's true. And it could be. They've been in every game though this year. And here, Big 12, number 1 BYU is BYU will beat Penn State in the playoff. Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched a ton of Penn State, but right now there's teams that concern me more than Penn State would.
We'll see. We'll see where that shakes out.
And then also says, Trevor, how do you know Adam? Is he semi-newer on your videos? Also, please get the SMU comedian guy on again. Yeah, I will, and he's been trying to get me on his show. It's been tough because when he records his my kids have activities at the time, and so I'd like to do more with him. But he's a good guy. Go check out his channel. He does a lot of funny videos. And but Adam and I have been doing this for a while. Generally during football season, we'll figure out what we do during basketball and what kind of what we want to work out yet. We haven't really discussed that yet, but yeah. So Adam joins me, and I appreciate it because he's got way better insights than I do.
I don't know about that. Trevor and I have been talking sports for a long time. We've been friends for quite a number of years, and he told me he was starting this podcast, and I'm fortunate enough to be invited on once in a while and get to run my mouth.
Well, I will admit, yeah, it's true. We met, I think it's been 10 years now, but yeah, we're talking anyway, and I actually don't tell most people I know that I do this. Sometimes they stumble upon it. Actually, Bowman, he stumbled upon it on our live chat after on Utah. So, but anyway, yeah, finally I was like, you know what, Adam and I are talking all the time. I'd love to have him on and do these conversations. I think it's a lot of fun, especially during football season. So may as well capture it for the show. And then Trayson lastly says, "Big game Bill." Yeah, I love the nickname. He certainly was quite the baller, and just so much man, just charisma. He just oozed it, and he's
got the it factor.
And the whole thing, the snap, the hold, everything was great. Laces were out, so but he says, "I'm newer to your channel. Sorry if Adam isn't newer. I am, though. Just seen you on the majority that I have seen on your videos." Yeah, during football season, we do a lot more frequently, but love having Adam on. So
no, Trevor's on every video. That's his channel, and so I just get to pop in on occasion. That's probably why I haven't seen a ton of me, but I come here for football season, and yeah, we'll have to work some out for basketball season. It's going to be a good year.
It's tough. Both of us have busy schedules and kids, so it's tough lining up. He stays up much later than I think he prefers to during football season. So okay, 1-2 says, "It was good to see the CFP committee finally give BYU a little respect." Absolutely. We talked about some of that. If you're just getting on 1-2, you have to go back and check out an earlier video, but we did talk a bit about that, and Adam getting some more love. Keep popping in. So yeah, he certainly will. Perhaps some of the bigger games during the basketball season, some of the biggest ones. But yeah, I don't think either one of us made it to the UCF game. I almost did. Adam didn't. So
no, I would have loved to go there. I got ECU on the docket for next year. I can't wait to go to that one.
Yeah, everyone wants to ditch that game, but
I'm happy we're playing it so I can go to a game.
Right, exactly. Fans in general, like, why are we playing that game? I'm like, no, I want them to play that game.
Yeah.
So, so we can go to that. So, anyway, well, perfect. Time for us to, like I mentioned, Adam's got to be up early. He's tired. He's already turning into a pumpkin. So, let's we'll sign off now. And thanks all for joining us. Thanks for the comments and the engagement. That's why we do this. Appreciate it. And gear up for the Kansas game. And yes. Yeah. I did cover hoops a bit last year, more towards the end of the season. I'd kind of taken a hiatus, a lot of things going on, but yeah, I hope to cover it more.
We'll have to do it more consistently this year. It's too good, man.
You guys updated. Yeah. In terms of schedule, we don't know like what day we'll record and how we'll work that out, but we'll figure it out and get something going. Like I said, with maybe some of the definitely around some of the bigger games once we get in conference, but I'd love to. It's so hard during football season to, fully commit into basketball, especially when it's non-conference games, especially some of these cupcakes early on. But man, this team looks so good. I mean, that's how much there was to talk about with football. We didn't even talk about basketball, and there's a lot to cover there. So we'll get there. So appreciate it, guys. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.